Hello, and welcome to People of the Pod, brought to you by American Jewish Committee. Each week, we take you beyond the headlines to help you understand what they all mean for America, Israel, and the Jewish people. I'm your host, Manya Brashear-Pashman. After 505 days as a hostage in Gaza, Tal Shoham returned to Israel, to his wife and 2 young children, and to an extended family whose lives have been on hold since the Hamas terror attacks on October 7, 2023. Tal had been taken hostage from his home in Kibbutz Be'eri with his wife, his children, his wife's aunt, his 12-year-old niece, and his mother-in-law, Shoshan Haran. Shoshan returned home with the other women and children on November 26, 2023. She is with us now to talk about welcoming Tal home, the tremendous loss she and her family have suffered, and the endless fight to get the rest of the hostages home. Shoshan, welcome to People of the Pod.
Thank you. Nice being here.
Well, I'm glad that you're here to at least partially celebrate the return of your loved ones. It has been more than 500 days since that awful day in October. Can you take our listeners back a few days before the 7th to October 4th? What were you doing that day?
On October 4th, we had a very big event of women making peace in the Dead Sea, together with a sister movement, Women of the Sun. It's a Palestinian movement. Both women-led movements working for peace on both sides. And I went there with my sister, Lilach, and with the founder of this movement, Vivian Silver, who was my neighbor in Kibbutz Be'eri. And it was such an optimistic event and heartwarming. We were there, thousands of women, some men also. And we were talking about the power of women to bring peace and how we should stop the bloodshed, how we should find a new way to live together in peace. That was on October 4th. 2 days later, on October 6th, we are getting ready for Simchat Torah to celebrate with our family. We had the sukkah already since a week ago, and we invited my daughter, Adi, and her husband, Tal, and the little kids, Nave, who was then 8 years old, and Yahel, Yula, 3 years old, to join us for Simchat Torah. So we were cooking, getting for the holidays. It was a Shabbat dinner, was so cooking. And then we got a call from Avshal. Avshalom is my husband, and the nickname is Avshal. And we got a call from his sister, Sharon, that wanted to join us for that evening with her daughter, Noam, who was then 12 years old. And we celebrated together in the sukkah, having fun. The kids were playing all over. And then we went to sleep. We had kind of a loft above our house for hosting our guests, and that's where Tal and Adi and the kids stayed overnight. Sharon and her daughter stayed with us on the ground level, and we went to sleep. And then at 6:29 a.m., we heard the color red is the code for attack. And we thought it is, I shouldn't say it, but the usual missile attack on us. So we went to the safe room. And then after a few minutes, we went out. My husband went up to the second floor to get a detail and the kids down to be with us. And I started making hot chocolate for the grandkids. And then we got the warning we have a community WhatsApp for alarms, and they told us that they suspect that some terrorists penetrated the kibbutz, and then we should go into the safe room. And a few minutes later, they confirmed that a terrorist attack was launched on the kibbutz.
Who was in that safe room with you?
We were in the safe room, 7 people: Tal, Adi, my daughter, the kids, my grandkids, Sharon and Noam. Avshal stayed outside with a knife ready to protect his family and also looking through the windows to understand what was going on. And then we started hearing shooting and grenades, and they got closer and closer to us. My cell phone was the only one that had a reception inside the safe room. And after 1 hour and a half of terror, Tal texted my husband to join us in the safe room because he understood that a knife is not going to protect us. So there was no way in. So Avshal joined us, and Tal and him, we had a very large dinner table when we have guests, and the extensions were in the safe room. So very heavy pieces of wood, and they used it to protect the handle of the safe room door because there was no lock, but they were just pushing it against the safe room door. I heard them breaking into my neighbor's home. I heard a lot of glasses and a lot of shooting and grenades. I didn't know what was happening there. And then they left. And then they penetrated our house. They just broke into it. It's easy. It was full of windows that you could easily break into. And they started shouting at us, open the door, open the door. We did not. And then they had steel penetrating bullets that went through the safe room iron door. And I even saw one bullet passing very close to my head. It was, the movement of the bullet was a little bit slowed, so I could see it. And my husband shouted at me, "Just lie down," because my head was a little bit upwards, looking at the cell phone and trying to call for help. They couldn't break in the safe room door, and then they left, and we thought that maybe we were saved. But then, after a few minutes, they brought a bulldozer and they just cracked the safe room window. And the safe room window is composed of two steel parts that should be connected, but with the bulldozer, they were able to dismantle the window and create a crack. And then we had a few seconds to decide to surrender or not. And then my husband and Tal decided to surrender. We were under the bed, so we didn't see much, but they understood that the crack will allow the terrorists to throw grenades into the room. So they decided to surrender, and then the terrorists opened the window, so we stopped resisting. They opened the window, and then my husband and Tal went out first, and that was the last glance that I had of my husband. And it took us a while because we were under the bed and we were three women and three little kids. So we went out of the room. They grabbed us through the window. And when my daughter was out, she saw her kids. They took her kids separately and she just shouted at them, "Mother, kid, mother, kid." And she just kidnapped. She grabbed them from the terrorists. She's a real hero, my daughter. And then they pushed us with a gun pointed at us. And when we were out of the safe room, I saw already 6 or 7 members of the kibbutz were already murdered and were lying near our home. And they were pushing us towards the fence around the kibbutz, which they already destroyed. And one of them that looked really lunatic, he handcuffed me with my hands behind my back, and they just pushed us into the car that they brought from Gaza and drove towards the Gaza Strip. We didn't see any IDF soldiers. The border was completely abolished. There was no border. We didn't see any Air Force. We saw nothing. It was just driving through the open fields into the Gaza Strip. We were sitting in the back seat of the car. I had Nave, my grandson, on my lap. Adi was holding Yula, and Sharon was holding her daughter, Noam. And the two terrorists were sitting in front. And when we crossed the border into Gaza, I mean, the theoretical border, there was nothing there. One of the terrorists told us, "Welcome to Gaza." And I said, "Thank you." And then we just entered into Gaza.
You said that was your last glance of Shal when he climbed out the window.
So we were in captivity for 50 days. And during these horrible days, I was almost sure that both Tal and Afshal were hostages in Gaza because they were kidnapped a few minutes before us. And I understood that the goal of the terrorists was to have hostages. And so I was very confident, I should say, that both of them are hostages in Gaza. And I knew by intuition that Israel will demand to release women and children first. I just knew it. And I told Adi and Sharon all the time, I said, we need to survive. Every day that we survive will get us closer to our release. Because I knew that the terrorists see us as bargain chips to get their prisoners released. So I said, our mission is just to survive. I need to keep my family, I need to survive. And I thought that Tal and Avshal are also hostages. And I learned about the fact that they murdered my husband on October 7th only after I was released and I met my daughter and my son. And they had to tell me the horrible truth that he was murdered, but not only him. My sister was murdered, my little sister, my younger sister, her husband, his caregiver, 102 people from my kibbutz, from the little community that we know everyone, were murdered on October 7th.
This was your sister Lilach who had been at the event on October 4th with you, yes?
Yes.
I am so sorry. May all of those memories be a blessing, every one of them in the kibbutz. Did you stay with your daughter and grandchildren in Gaza the entire time, or were you separated?
No, we were together, luckily. We were handed over by the kidnappers to what I used to term as guards in Gaza. And I use the term guards because we wanted the children to live in the belief that these people are guarding us. So we didn't call them terrorists, not even between ourselves. We called them guards. We were moved from one house to another, so we were not in the tunnels. We were in top Hamas leaders' houses. What they did in all of these houses, they created a separate room for us where we did not see the family of the Hamas leader, but we heard the voices. We heard the voices of the commander, we heard the voices of his wife and the children. So it was like a provisoric arrangement. And the guards were always in between us and the family. I mean, we didn't see the family, but we heard them. And the guards were the ones who brought us foods, and they were kind of in between. We had an event in the second house that we stayed. We had an event of knock on the roof. Knock on the roof is a term that the IDF is using when the Air Force is aiming to hit a specific house without harming the people who live inside the house. One time it was supposed to be 2 blocks away from us, so the terrorists, they know exactly the address. And they told us just to stay away from the window. So if the glass is breaking, we will not be wounded. The second time it was very close to where we stayed, maybe even the place we stayed specifically. So they evacuated us and the family of the Hamas terrorist who was holding us. We were evacuated to the street, and then we were taken to another house. And eventually we were taken to a fourth house where we stayed 43 days. And in that house, the Hamas person who joined us knew English. So I started to talk. Before that, the guards or the captors didn't speak any English. They knew some very basic words like bomb, far, go, come, simple words. But in the fourth house that we stayed 43 days, the Hamas terrorist knew quite good English.
Did you seize on that and try to have conversations with your captors?
We had lots of conversations and talks, and I'm a very passionate reader, so I read a lot of books, and including Holocaust survivors books, and I used a lot of the wisdom how to survive when I was in Gaza. So the first thing I knew that I should not show any weakness. I looked in their eyes, I talked straightforward, I didn't show any panic or hysterical or crying or stuff like that. The other thing is, I knew I had to keep hope and be determined that we will be released. So that was very important. And that gave us strength. And also, I counted the days. I knew the day of the week and I knew the date. And to eat when you can, to sleep when you can. So to be very determined and very focused on the present. You don't have the capacity to think about the past or the future. You just focus on survival every second, every minute, every hour, how to protect your family and how to create some kind of a relationship with your captors so they will get to know us and this will give some layer of protection.
Did you feel like you successfully fostered a relationship?
Yeah, it's a very tricky situation. So on one hand, I used to think his mother was cooking, was providing the food. We never saw her, but we heard her voice, we heard the babies on the other side of the apartment, but there was no eye contact. But when I knew that she was the one who is preparing the food for us and for the captors and for her family. So every time that this guy, her son, brought us the food, I said, I want you to thank your mother. And I mentioned a few times that I appreciate the fact that they are guarding us and they are providing us the food, although it was very minimal, but still. And after a few days, we started to talk about life. I know about their salaries, I know their problems, I know how they get married or why they're not married yet. I know about their mission. The mission is very clear. They want to destroy Israel. It's a jihadistic mission. It's very clear. They talk about it very openly. And actually, they tried to convince us to leave Israel. He was saying, why don't you go back to Europe or go to Florida? I don't know, for some reason, Florida is like a symbol for them, for the Jewish community in the US. And he said, next time we're going to come harder on Israel. And I'm not sure that you'll have such a nice team to take care of you. So I advise you go leave Israel. And at a certain point, he asked me, if you go back to Israel, will you go back to the kibbutz? So I said to him, I don't want to hear the word if, when we go back to Israel. And regarding the kibbutz, I said it's a very good question, but I never gave him an answer. I knew what he wanted to hear. So they were in a state of mind that, on one hand, you do create human interactions, and they played with the children. The children were so sweet, and they started to play. His family had the same age kids at the other side of the house, so there were human interactions, but it was very clear that their mission is to keep us as bargaining chips. And at one point, after I felt more, I don't know, relaxed with the interaction with him, because all my talks were with this specific guy, because he was the only one who talked English. I said, I don't know which expression I said, but I'm very angry about the people I saw who penetrated the kibbutz and murdered my friends. And I saw the house of my sister was on fire. It was already bombed, with I don't know what, whatever. And actually, I gave her and her husband like 1% chances to be alive. What I saw in the house was it would require a miracle for them to survive. So I told him that I'm angry at the people who penetrated the kibbutz and did these horrible things, but I do thank him and the guards and his family to protect us and to feed us.
Did you get any glimmer of remorse or compassion or empathy from them at that point?
He told me, we are the same. We are the same, meaning me and the terrorists who penetrated the kibbutz are the same. They received a mission to murder and to burn. And I received a mission to hold you as bargaining chips for the release of the Palestinian prisoners. And this was a very cruel sentence because while we were in captivity, we were fully dependent on every expression of their faces. They could do anything to us. My mind couldn't handle this sentence, and I kind of buried it in I just put it aside. I didn't want to think about it because it was so cruel. But I was sure that if anybody will try to rescue us, they will murder us. I was sure. I was not confused in that sense. I knew that they use us as assets, they see us as assets. And if they will feel that somebody is trying to rescue us by force, then they will kill us. And going to the situation now, you know that Tal, my son in law, Tal Shoham, was released 2 weeks ago. And actually, it's the first time I started to breathe after a year and some months of fighting for his life and, taking care of helping my daughter and the grandkids and everybody. But we need to remember there are 59 more hostages in Gaza. And we must keep on the fight. We must not give up.
A religion reporting colleague of mine, Dave Schechter, in Atlanta, is a cousin of yours. And when Tal was released, he wrote about how the extended family all around the world fought for and celebrated that release. Were you able to feel that love or sense that family energy?
When I was a hostage in Gaza, I knew that my family and friends in Israel will not stay quiet just because I know them. But as I said before, most of the time you don't think of anything else besides what's going on in your cell. Actually, I looked at our situation as if we are astronauts in a hostile world, but unfortunately, with terrorists pointing guns at our heads inside the satellite. So when I was in Gaza, I thought about the fact that my family and friends will not stay quiet and will fight, but only on the way to Gaza. Once I was there, the focus is survival. You just don't have any capacity to think on the past, on the future, or on anything that is beyond here and now. After I returned, first of all, Yuval, my son, told me that he organized a march from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem with 50,000 people when we were in captivity. And Shaked, my daughter, she was then 9 months pregnant, and she flew to the US with AJC, by the way, without insurance because she was 9 months pregnant. No insurance company would cover her flight, but she still went and she was all over. And when they told me, I suddenly felt the connection. And of course, while I was there, I got millions of emails and, WhatsApp I didn't have because my phone was stolen, but emails from all over the world, including from Africa, the places that my NGO is working with smallholder farmers, Fair Planet, we call it. Now I think it's a bit naive name, but still.
And really, the Jewish people as a collective have come together at this moment in history. Were you able to feel that sense of community in your circumstance? Or if not then, can you feel it now that Tal is home and you can, as you just said, breathe?
10 days after I was released, on November 26th of November, 50 days after we were taken, I came to the US and the AJC people helped us get meetings with congressmen and Senate members. They took us all over. I was just in the meetings, but in the corridors of the Senate, the corridors of the Congress, and in and out with meetings. And I really, really, really appreciate not only this help, but this was my personal feeling. I mean, we were just landed. I was still half in Gaza and half in my freedom. And here I am in the US talking to decision makers and influencers. And this was done with the help of you guys. So I think it's a nice opportunity to thank you. Thank you for all the help. Thank you for all the help that you are doing since then. I know it started very early on. Actually, my daughter, my younger daughter, Shaked, came to the US to meet you guys and to meet congressmen few days after I was kidnapped. So when I was in Gaza, actually. I think the way I see it, I always knew the importance of the Jewish people all over the world. And of course, the importance of Israel being an independent Jewish democratic country, the importance of Israel to the Jews in the world, and the importance of the Jews in the world for Israel. I knew it, but the strength of these connections was much more evident after this horrific October 7th attack. So I felt that the Jewish world is not only with us, but on a very practical level with us. And using all the network and all the professionals in Washington, in New York, I was invited to synagogues a few times, to big synagogues in Manhattan. What I felt that a lot of Jewish people abroad that were not so much active in their connection to Israel understood the importance of Israel to them and the urgency to work together on this crisis. And I think this will not go away. That's my feeling. But now we need to focus on the 59 hostages. I know the feeling I had until 2 weeks ago. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't smile. You look at the news and you get heart attacks. Every single news piece, and you just cannot breathe. And the families of these 59 hostages are still in this situation. We are not allowed to forget and let go.
Thank you for expressing your gratitude. And I must echo that gratitude to you for sharing that story and reliving all of that trauma. I'm sorry that you had to remember some of those horrible moments, though I do think that they are illuminating for those who just simply can't grasp what your family went through. You did not see Tal again until he returned to Israel. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. About my husband, I heard only when I returned. But there were evidence from October 7th that Tal was taken alive. People saw him in Gaza. So we knew that he was taken. And we were just hoping and praying that none of the horrible things that could happen while you are in captivity will not happen to him. He had a horrible time, but he was released. And my daughter, Adi, his wife, told me it's either 0 or 1. Either you get your husband, your loved ones back alive, and you can rebuild your future and unite your family, or it's a 0. And for the 59 hostages who are still in Gaza, we need to do anything that we can and keep the pressure, keep the energy, keep the fight. If you care about the civilian Palestinians in Gaza, like I do, that all my life I was working for peace, the only thing you need to focus on is releasing the hostages. Because the hostages, the fact that the Hamas terrorists are still keeping them there, is a devastating fact for the Palestinians. Because the Hamas, they don't care about their own people.
Is it too soon to ask, once all the hostages return, and they will, what comes next? Is there a movement already afoot to make sure Israel and others never forget what happened on October 7th? Or is it too soon to ask that question?
I think once all the hostages are back, we will need, and also the Jewish people in the world will need to do cheshbon nefesh. I don't know how to say it in English. To rethink and reconsider our views and our actions looking forward. I think we cannot be naive anymore and say to ourselves, they're just saying that they want to kill us all, but they don't really mean it. And they will not dare to do it, and so on and so forth. I think now we need to look at the facts as they are and recalculate our stance, our thoughts. I think, first of all, we need to follow the money. Because one thing I can tell you, without funding, Hamas would never get to this stage. And neither Iran or the Houthis or Hezbollah. There are forces in the world who are supporting financially the organizations or the countries who declare that they want to destroy and abolish Israel. We need to follow the money. We need to be smart. That's one. And that's a big question. I'm just putting it on the table, but it's a big question how to do it, but we must do it. And the other thing is the key for mutual existence is education. And what I learned recently, for example, is that the Palestinian Authority or the people in Gaza, they do not teach about the Holocaust. They do not know about the Holocaust. My captors, they were 24, 25, and 31, and then the commander was 40. Looking at the dates of the decision not to teach about the Holocaust, I'm sure they had no understanding why we are here. They think that we came here like a colonialist, and then if they will give us enough trouble, we will go away. But we're not going to go away. We are staying. And until they change their mission to destroy us, we need to be stronger and smarter than them.
Shoshan, thank you so much for being with us, for sharing your story, and for giving us hope, sharing your hope, then giving us hope that the hostages are all coming home and that there is a future for Israel.
There is a future for Israel, this I'm sure. but we need the Jewish people with us, and we need to work together.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. And regards to all my friends at AJC.
If you missed last week's episode, be sure to tune in for my conversation with two scientists at MIT who have created a foundation to ensure Israeli scholars and their American colleagues can collaborate freely and foster research and innovation that benefits all of humanity. Thank you for listening. This episode is brought to you by AJC. Our producer is Atara Lakritz. Our sound engineer is TK Broderick. You can subscribe to People of the Pod on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Google Podcasts, or learn more at ajc.org/peopleofthepod. The views and opinions of our guests don't necessarily reflect the positions of AJC. We'd love to hear your views and opinions or your questions. You can reach us at peopleofthepod@ajc.org. If you've enjoyed this episode, please be sure to tell your friends, tag us on social media with #PeopleOfThePod, and hop on to Apple Podcasts to rate us and write a review to help more listeners find us. Tune in next week for another episode of People of the Pod.